Tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the seven seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog John Martin as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog John Martin and Captain Ted Yoho.
We talked on our show on Monday about the impending elections that happened on Tuesday and what it would mean and everything else. Well, I don't think there was a lot of really big surprises, but we'll talk about it in a minute. But Mandami, no surprise really whatsoever. He won solidly. And, it's potentially, as you can see in that meme right there, going to be a boom to Florida because they're going to make him Realtor of the Year, apparently, because the people are going to be flooding down here. I'll tell you this real quick, and I'll turn it over to you, Ted. I was watching the president this week on Wednesday, I think it was actually. He was down at a some type of economic summit, if you will, down in Miami, and a lot of people from all over the world there. But he had the mayor of Miami-Dade was there,
right?
And he spoke, and he actually said that they were, and he wasn't joking. He said that his sources tell him that real estate in the Miami area is projected to go up from 30 to 70%, depending on the location, directly because of the election results in New York. And he was not joking. Anyway, what are your general thoughts about what happened with the New York? And we'll talk a little deeper about it in a minute, but go ahead.
Well, going back to the mayor of Miami, that is not a joke. Look at the Yoho rentals to go from New York to come to Florida. People are moving. They're going to move out in droves. In fact, they've lost over 631 residents. And the report I have was from 2020 to now. And I think it's higher than that, really, because I think these are outdated numbers. But I think you're going to see that. The election, like you said, it's what we kind of anticipated. It wasn't what we wanted. But you look at the candidate field. I mean, you had Mario Cuomo, and then you had, or Andrew Cuomo, and then you had Swally. And I mean, it was just a terrible candidate field. And then you had Moran Zidani, who was very charismatic, very articulate, good-looking guy. The people just went to him in droves, and it was the Goliath, David against Goliath type of scenario, and people rallied around David, and it kind of happens over and over again. And it's I think it's interesting. I know you're going to go into a speech. The first person he kind of edified was Eugene Debs, who was the founder of the American Socialist Political Activists back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get too deep into it, I want to say something about the candidates. You mentioned the candidates because I agree with everything you said, but Swilla was hammered quite a bit for not dropping out of the race and all that. And I can understand why they were saying it, not getting into all that. But the reality is, if you look at the numbers, even if he had dropped out, and you assume, which I don't think you can do, that every single person that voted for him would have voted for Cuomo, I don't think that that's a reasonable assumption, because I don't think they would have voted for Mandami, but a portion of them wouldn't have voted at all. And you do the math on it, and there's no way no one could have beaten in that field, no matter what. They could not have beaten Mandami this time. I think that needs to be said.
I find it really interesting because Mandami's whole thing was how America's broke and, the American dream's gone, but yet he's an example of the American dream. Somebody that comes from nowhere and can achieve in this country, that's the American dream. And, it's going to be interesting how he navigates New York City and runs it. It's going to be interesting. I mean, this is the experiment of American politics. It's an experiment in self-government, and let's see where it goes. I don't like it, but I don't live there, and there's a reason I don't live there.
Well, if you look at, and we'll talk more about the other elections in a moment, but there are some crossovers for sure. And
There
one
are.
thing about Mandami, which is positive for him, I suppose, and potentially positive for the Democrats, but really troubling on another level, is that a good chunk of his support were young people, very young people, a lot of women, but mostly young people that, between the 18 and like 25, and then the 25 to 35, all of them. And the thing about the 18 to 25, Ted, that really troubles me is a good chunk of those people are not going to be instantly impacted by his policies because they don't pay a lot of bills. I'm not saying they don't have expenses, but a lot of them are people who really are pretty privileged. And if you break the statistics down somewhat, the working class people and a lot of poor working class people voted for, in fact, Cuomo. So the types of people that came out and supported Mandami and gave him really the huge edge is a little troubling in the nature of their, I would say, ignorance of what our system is really about. That's what I would say.
It really is, John. And I think people are in for a rude awakening. I mean, he talked about all these things he's going to do, and free a rent freeze, faster and freer buses, free universal child care, and the list goes on. And these are things politicians promise in the beginning of their campaign, but they get bogged down in the mire of politics. And Kathy Hochul, I was just listening to her. We were fighting to reduce rent. We were fighting to increase pay, and we're doing this. So she's been doing that for however long she's been in office. And the governor before that said the same thing, and so forth. And it's not something you can deliver to the people. And we'll talk more about that.
We had an event happen where you had a vote in the U.S. Senate, and you had, I believe it was 5 Democrats that crossed the line, if you want to call it that, and voted to move the shutdown issue forward and break basically the filibuster, if you will, of keeping the government funded. It's not the final vote. It just allows them to proceed. And the final vote, depending on, they could literally have it today, but it's most likely supposedly going to come on Wednesday because they're probably not going to do it today. And tomorrow is Veterans Day when most of that stuff is closed down. So it looks like Wednesday. What are your general thoughts on that, Ted? Because let me just tell you right off the top, I'm still a bit skeptical that it will actually happen, but it probably will.
I think that is well-founded skepticism, the way government has not been working here in the recent years. Both sides are claiming victory, which I think is ridiculous. Who wins in a shutdown? Nobody wins. The American people get hurt. I stopped at a Dollar General to buy a gallon of milk yesterday, and I asked the lady, I said, how's it going? And she goes, it's going okay. She goes, I haven't been paid in 3 days. They were supposed to pay me on Friday, and it was Sunday. She hasn't paid. She goes, and I'm living in my van. And she was of gray-haired age. And, I'm thinking, we are so blessed in this country, and we have people in Washington having these silly fights. We should never have a shutdown. We should never get to this point. If they do what they're supposed to do, we would never have a shutdown. And that's the thing that, irritates me because they become more frequent and they're lasting longer. We never had these prior to the 1970s. Congress did their job, but they're not doing that now. I'm happy they're at where they're at, but I think you're going to see more drama when it comes to the House. I hope I'm wrong, but I think you're going to see some hard nose saying we're not going to allow the vote coming up for the extension of the subsidies, which are an add-on to the Obamacare that should never have been there, but they went in there with COVID. So I'm just happy that they have made it a step closer to solving this, and let's move on, and let's pray that they come together in some kind of a consensus and do what's right for the American people and do what's right for the country.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk some more about it in a second, but let me go ahead and give you the bottom line too, just so people know about it. Even if this thing passes and they open up the government, we could experience another shutdown in January because what they voted on yesterday, and if it stays the same way, it will be a very temporary, just funding the government basically to the end of the calendar year, not the fiscal year. That's a totally different situation. So we're not totally out of the woods, shut down yet. But now the debate that I've been hearing is who, quote, won the shutdown. The only thing I know for sure, and we'll talk about the details in a minute, is that the American people didn't win the shutdown. That's for sure. And both sides, to a certain extent, Ted, are culpable in the fact that it never should come to this if they were doing the work they need to do, regardless of who's in power.
You're absolutely right. There was a bill passed in 76, I think it was. Excuse me. It was called the Budget Control Act, and it was Budget Control and Impoundment Act. And this is where Congress was supposed to do what they're supposed to do. And this goes into what Madami's saying about we're going to freeze rents and we're going to give all this stuff away free. Nixon tried to freeze a lot of things, wages and all that in America to keep prices down. It doesn't work. And so the Budget Control Act was supposed to correct that, and of course it didn't. And we've had these debt ceiling votes that come up and they don't pass them. And then the government shuts down, and they're becoming a way of running business as usual in Washington. And we, the American people in our country, are losing. We're in jeopardy. $38 trillion now in debt, just unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we mentioned it on a Friday show or not, but I can't remember. But just to talk about Madami, if you want to know how phony that guy really is, because, am I saying that he's not a communist socialist? Yeah, he is a communist socialist, but I think sometimes he's just playing a role and other people are manipulating him. Because the day after the election, he made a speech about what he was going to do as transition team. He asked for money, a guy who doesn't want money. He asked for money. He's raised almost $1 million in his transition overnight, literally. But he flew out that day. He's probably back now, but he went to the most posh resort in the Caribbean in Puerto Rico, where it's just only multimillionaires go to this place, hanging out, partying. They showed videos. He's meeting with a bunch of Muslim clerics who aren't taking a vow of poverty, by the way, in the most posh place they could be the day after his election, basically.
Yeah, New York, you guys voted him in. God bless you. It's the experiment of American politics. You have the right to do that. You also have the right to suffer the consequences of that. And I'm not asking for anybody to suffer. It's just be prepared for things, because nothing is free. It's just the story gets played over and over again throughout history, John. You think people would wise up? It'll be interesting to follow what happens in New York. Like I said, the rent controls, they've tried that over and over again. They don't work. Wage control, they've tried that. You can see what happened to California when they raised the rates to minimum wage was $30?
Yeah, and
I think Madami is talking about that. It just doesn't work, and I can tell you that because Carol and I we're fairly well off. You go to a drive-in restaurant, and just to get a burger and a fry and a drink, it's over $30. And it's like, I don't need to do this. I can make a better burger at home.
With social media, there's a lot of keyboard junkies out there that are real bold behind the keyboard. In fact, the last death threat we got was a guy up in Seattle, Washington. And when the FBI called me up and said they got him, I said, is this somebody I need to worry about? He kind of chuckled and said, no, you don't have to worry about this guy. But he's real bold behind a keyboard, and they can make these nasty comments that emboldens other people, that'll embolden the guy that'll carry out an action. And, I feel for John Fetterman, because I think he is, I hate to say this, but he is the voice of reason for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Like I say, prayers go out.
And they ran him out of office.
Oh, yeah. Well, they literally confronted him physically. If you remember, they blocked him in a garage, wouldn't let him out, all that kind of stuff. They attacked him while he was on the boat that he lived off of in D.C. and all that. They literally were trying to kill him. But all you got to do, Ted, just to kind of sum up on this topic, is look at a few things that just recently happened. You had those people, that attorney general that won the race in Virginia, literally saying, that the Speaker of the House there should, in Virginia, 2 bullets to the head, children did. And the frightening thing about that, beyond him just saying it, is that they did exit polling on people, and like I think it was 50% of the Democrats interviewed said that those statements were disqualifying, but 47% of those that said that voted for him anyway, no matter what. And then they had some polling that just came out about a month ago that I asked the question about political violence, and over 50% of Democrats said it was justified in some cases. Political violence was justified, and that was shortly after Kirk got shot.
No, it is. I mean, it goes back to one of the guys that was a strategist for the Democratic Party. He goes, we don't care about being right in the argument. We just want to win. And they want to win so they can have power. If they have power, they can control. And John, look at, I sent you that article, and we talked about this in Canada, how they've got a government mandate. It wasn't law. It was something Trudeau did, but it's being carried forward to turn in your guns. And if you don't turn in your guns, they have the electronic means to turn off your life. Your credit card, your banking, telecommunications, transportation. They have that. And don't discount this, that if an AOC or a Madani or the Democrat socialists get in charge, do you think they're going to let people have their guns in this country? Give me a break. And that's why the founders were so adamant about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, because they knew the threat of a tyrannical government, a government that gains that much power is going to control your life. And they fought a revolutionary war. And so here we are moving into the Civil War, the impending Civil War, and the fuse is getting shorter.
Yeah, and to top it all off, just this week out at Berkeley, they had the Turning Point USA rally there, and Berkeley is quoted as being the epicenter, supposedly, of the free speech movement. I actually think it was 1776, but that's just my opinion. But they had people were accosted trying to get into the facility and literally beaten and bloodied by people who were being paid to stop free speech in America. And I saw that on the left criticizing that.
I saw that, and it reminded me of the brown shirts of Adolf Hitler. Those were the thugs doing exactly the same thing. And where is the media? Where is the media attacking this stuff? They never attack that because they're in bed with those kind of people, which I don't understand, because once those people take charge, you think there's going to be a free press? Give me a break. They will be censored more than they've ever been censored before. But those are the brown shirts of the Nazi party. And I'm not calling them Nazis. I'm just saying history repeats itself. And by God, people better wake up, or you're going to have that. We experienced that when we were in Washington, D.C. I've experienced that when I had town hall meetings. And you and I have seen that when you went around to the Tesla protests. These people are paid people. You look at them, and they couldn't fight their way out of a brown paper bag, but I don't even know. Yeah. Anyways, this is what's happening. Wake up, America. This is a call in the middle of the night. Paul Revere Raider with my candlelight saying, wake up, wake up.
Well, we got a few minutes left in the show, and I want to move into a topic that I'd rather ignore to a certain extent, but it keeps coming up over and over and over. And I'm actually going to use a New York Times article about this, because I read stuff and watch stuff so you don't have to, part of my public service. But the Epstein files issue has popped up again because the House, they signed a petition, 218 signature. It's called a discharge position. And right. Republicans signed on it too, not being overly critical of any of them. But it happened Wednesday night when they were voting to keep the government open or to end the shutdown. And basically it forces a vote at some point about whether to release the Epstein files. Speaker Johnson has said that vote is likely to come next week. I doubt that, will it pass the House? Probably, but it's probably dead after that. But what are your general thoughts on where we're at with all of those issues?
Well, the discharge petition is going to come up. And it will pass the House, but I think, like you said, I don't think it will pass the Senate. And see, now that's going to give fuel for the midterms. The Republican Senate majority is blocking the release of these files. And if you take it back to the genesis of this, in the House and the whole investigation, members of Congress run on, we want transparency and accountability. All right, here's your opportunity. I agree. Release the Epstein files in total. They should do that with the JFK assassination. They should do that with UFOs. All these investigations that they have clandestine hearings and they don't let the public know, that causes this banter out here in this division. Expose it and let the chips fall where they may be. And I think they should. Johnson was holding off to get that Representative Grijalva, I think out of Arizona. She was the last one to sign this, and Republicans and Democrats did. And if you believe in transparency, this should go through the House and it should go through the Senate and let expose that stuff. I think Bill Clinton needs to be more worried about this than anybody else. Maybe
he's the only one that literally had a portrait at the guy's house in a dress. I mean that.
Well, and maybe he'll show up at a hearing on Capitol Hill in his blue dress.
Absolutely.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Ward, that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth!
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's gonna come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. I wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, thanks.
Help me! Help! Help! They don't highlight the fact that none of this would be necessary. We wouldn't have to deport a single illegal, and they wouldn't have the magnitude if it weren't primarily for what happened in the Biden administration, letting all these millions of people in. We wouldn't be dealing with this.
You're absolutely right. And you would think people in our country would stand by government people that are the agencies like DHS. Instead of mocking them, putting them in risk, exposing them, they would stand there. Remember, it used to be the mantra, if you wanted to fight against crime, if you see something, say something. Yep. And so citizens would stand up and they would say, hey, I see this going on, this nefarious activity. And so the government could come in there, or the law enforcement could come in there and do what was proper. Now we're seeing, if you see something like ICE that wants to enforce the law, say something so we can protest. And it's the totally opposite of what you're seeing in Mexico.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to me to look at who's actually protesting some of this stuff. Because, you would think, based on what, like I was hearing on those liberal talk shows this morning, that, because they're kind of challenging black people, for instance, and it's about how they were mistreated and all that. I'm not denying any of that. But you don't see a lot of working class black people out there protesting. You don't really see a lot of Hispanic working class citizens protesting. The people you see protesting are either paid people or they're super white liberals, including, old gray-haired liberals like myself with the hair only comparison. And then you see some of these people who are benefiting from it, whether they be gang members or that kind of thing out in L.A. But in general, you don't see the average American really protesting that.
No, they're busy working. Isn't that amazing?
Imagine that.
But that mayor, Carlos Manzo, he was the mayor of Uraban, Mexico. He was murdered November 1st because he stood up against the crime and corruption in the cartels, and that guy's a national hero. And so you can see why they're protesting, because the government didn't do enough to go after these cartels, and it's just the opposite of that here in this country. I hope they bring those people to justice.
Yeah, and there's another kind of take on it, too, here in America, because we do have some issues with Generation Z here. But in America, there seems to be what I would call a general lawlessness with many in Generation Z. And I'm going to give, there's countless examples, so I'm only going to give you a couple of them. And when I say it, I don't mean that they're necessarily criminal gangs, but they're not really protesting conditions so much as just kind of, protesting society in general. But I want to play you this one video because in spite of all the crime statistics dropping and the calmness that has prevailed in D.C., there are some examples primarily of young people doing some pretty crazy stuff. And this happened, I believe, on Halloween, and they're basically bum rushing this park. And I want to play a quick clip of that, and we'll come back and talk about it.
D.C. police say they made multiple arrests so far this Halloween night in the Navy Yard neighborhood. We received this brand new video of what looks like teens fighting with National Guard members. Now, police say the arrests were made in the area of 1st and M Streets in Southeast. Right now, officers are asking people to avoid the area. Thank you for staying up with us. I'm Leslie Foster. As concerns,
most of that was happening in what they call near the Navy Yard. What is it called? The
Navy Yard area.
Navy Yard, where the vice president famously kind of
lives.
Right,
I stay down in that area, and I see the National Guard there every time I go there. They're walking around, crime is down, you feel safe in the street. But again, this Generation Z of the United States is attacking these people that are trying to enforce the rule of law. And you got to wonder, are the people protesting in Mexico paid by Soros and the nefarious groups that are funding a lot of these? I saw a clip, and I think you might have seen it too, a guy over the weekend. They interviewed him, said, "Why are you protesting?" And he had like a orange wig on and a dress. He's a guy. And he goes, "Be honest with you," he goes, "I'm just here because they paid me $200. That's how committed he was. And, they want people there in numbers to show how bad it is here in America.
I guess at least he's working, right?
He was working.
I wonder if he's claiming that on his taxes. I doubt it. But just to show you that it's happening really coast to coast, I want to play a what they call a street takeover, and it's from a suburb of L.A. basically. Check this out.
And a car caught fire during a street takeover in Lakewood. It happened late Saturday night. Witnesses say the car was doing donuts when it caught fire. The condition of the driver is still unknown. There were 2 other street takeovers in East LA around the same time, and multiple cars were also seen doing donuts in Compton. Some people in the large crowd used laser pointers as cars spun in circles. Now, it's not clear if LA County Sheriff's deputies made any arrests.
And that scene you just saw is happening in places like Boston, every major city.
Jacksonville. Jacksonville, Florida. I get calls from people over there.
And what's interesting to me about it is that the young people that are participating in this, now they have bum rush 7-Elevens. I'm not saying they don't commit some crimes, but the general thing, they don't really seem to be protesting anything in particular. They just seem to be disruptive, which to a certain extent is normal within young people. I do think that social media, the way it's used, compounds this problem and all of that, but there seems to be a restlessness about it, and it could be the fact that they're not being educated, and I'm not just talking about taught how to act. I mean, that's certainly a way, but the fact that they feel hopeless because they don't have any ability to get a good paying job, because they literally can't read and write. We're doing them a disservice. I'm not blaming the kids themselves for that. It's an adult not holding the feet to the fire. But I get a kick out of how, as I said earlier, I was listening to these programs, how they worry about every kid that is illegal here and all that, but they don't worry about the kids here not getting educated. Don't even get me started on like abortion and all that type of stuff. The liberals worry about all the wrong stuff. They should be holding people's feet to the fire about the kids' education and all that, because if they had a brighter outlook on the future, maybe they wouldn't just be living in the moment all the time.
Well, you bring up an important point. You say they don't care about the kids. They're standing up for these other things, but yet they do this manipulatively to take advantage of these people, to use them as a tool to try to drive a wedge between the conservative side against the liberal side, or the old establishment of what America has always stood for, and they want to tear that down. So they're using these people as pawns in the name of equity, equality, and all these things that they use, and it's a losing argument for people that have rational thought.
Well, back to this worldwide aspect of it, just to give you an example, the largest, quote, Gen Z protest took place in Nepal on September.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah, following a ban on social media, and led to the resignation of that nation's prime minister. And you think about it, Ted, to have a riot, if you want to call it, I'm not saying it's that necessary, but a protest in a place like Nepal, that takes a lot of courage on the young people's part. Things must be pretty bad.
It really does. And that there again, we're going back to social media, where you can get this message out. Remember the flash mobs they used to have?
Oh, yeah.
That's how the Arab Spring started in Tunisia, was social media. And they had all this disruption around the world, and everybody thought this was going to be the fall down of the radical Islamic terrorist groups. But really, it created a lot of those, and it was through the use of social media. And so the people that are behind these movements are smart. They know how to use social media. They knew the right buttons to push to get a crowd to show up and attack people that are out there trying to do their job. We see it with Custom Border Patrol, ICE agents, and they do this over and over again. Those things need to stop, and that's where the investigations on Capitol Hill go. Not that I'm up for more investigations on the oversight committees, because most of the time it's hindsight. But they'll spend this time, they'll get the information, say, oh, this was going on, but nothing comes of that.
Yeah, in Mexico, where they had this, said many young people say they are frustrated with systematic problems like corruption and impunity for violent crimes. That really sounds a lot like the MAGA movement to me.
It really does, and I would be upset with that too. Maybe they'll elect Donald Trump for their next president.
They probably do. But
maybe he'll make Mexico the 52nd state after Canada.
I have a quote here from a gentleman named Andreas Massa. He's a 29-year-old business consultant. And he said, we need more security. And he's carrying this flag that represents these movements called the skull flag. But he said they need more security. It's an interesting choice, the skull flag.
It sure is.
Because it's kind of a pirate thing, which we're talking about here a little bit.
Right.
But young people voted. It's interesting how young people in this country are voting. They voted in huge numbers for Donald Trump. There's no question about that. But they also voted in huge numbers for Madami in New York. And they kind of put him over the top in that primary. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're frustrated, I think, is the biggest thing. People are frustrated. They think government's going to bring down the price of rent. They think government's going to control the food costs and all this other stuff, and all this stuff they're going to get free. You know, there's going to be a reality check shortly after he gets sworn in. I mean, he's already out there fomenting protests to increase better working conditions at Starbucks. I've not gone into a Starbucks and said, man, these are terrible working conditions. I can't wait till this guy gets in there and improves these working conditions. You know, so I think there's just that level of frustration. And again, it goes back to social media. Let's inflame this group of people so that we can win the next election to bring about our agenda. And I was doing some research to see if Obama and Eric Holder were involved in some of this, but I can't find a connection as of yet. But these are the things that he was really behind, is the labor unions and making them stronger. And, you know, just as an aside, the agencies in Washington, a lot of the ones I work with when I go up there, one of the biggest impediments of them getting work done is they become unionized. And so what happens, and I know there's some great unions out there and great workers with unions, but when you do it in a bureaucracy like the government, it just gums it up, slows it down, and it becomes that much more inefficient.
We talked a lot about the Epstein files because it was coming up for a vote and all of that. And since then, it has been what I'd labeled the Epstein mania. So you may be tired of hearing about it. To a certain extent, I'm tired of talking about it, but we can't really help but talk a little bit about it because it's on every news network 24/7 right now, it seems like, with difference of opinions and all. But the Epstein files are going to be released. They passed the House almost unanimously. They passed the Senate pretty much the same way, and President Trump signed it, the legislation, pretty much as soon as the Senate got to him, and they roughly have 30 days to release the files according to the bill that passed. So what are your thoughts in general, Ted, about the Epstein files, what has transpired? And then we're going to get into some of the mania, but just give me your general thoughts about what happened this week and the aftermath of it.
Well, you know, I'm one that doesn't like to talk about that stuff because there's so many other problems, but it does warrant to be talked about because there is so much mania about it. And I think certainly what you're going to see you're going to see some very powerful people exposed, and it's going to change their life forever. And I'll give you a perfect example of that is Prince Albert from England. He has been stripped of, or Prince Andrew, he's been stripped of everything, every title. He's just been an outcast. And that was because of the Epstein files. And I think you're going to see more. And I think there's going to be Republicans in there, and then there's going to be Democrats in that. And I think once we get beyond this, let's focus on the things that are really important for the country, for the future of the country.
Well, on the note you just struck there, we just saw Larry Summers, I believe is his name, who was in the, I guess he was in the Obama administration, and he was the president of Harvard and a teacher there.
Harvard.
He was on the board of directors of one of the AI companies and everything. He just resigned from all of that because not only, I mean, this just shows you how stupid some of these geniuses are, and the guy really is a genius at certain levels. But he wasn't so much for what he did back during the heyday of the island. I don't know whether but he had a lot of back and forth with Jeffrey Epstein since all of this broke before his death and everything. He was asking him literally advice on women through email. I mean, how bright can these people really be? And he's the president of Harvard. So he's one of those, what I call educated idiots. I mean, I can't even imagine being that stupid considering what was happening. So what he resigned from was after all of the Epstein mania happened and all the transgressions, after he was already convicted. He was still in touch with this guy. That's just insane.
Well, it really is, John, when you think about it. And I mean, that was the same thing with Prince Andrew. You know, stuff came out a little bit about Andrew, and so they kind of slapped him on the wrist. But then it came out, and here Larry Summers, I mean, he was the Secretary of Treasury under Obama and the president of Harvard, MIT graduate, and asking Jeffrey Epstein for advice on women. That's like, give me a break. It's like
I guess Epstein's advice might be hire the right ones. I don't know. He truly had a binder of women.
I tell you what, when you're going to see it, and not, if Trump's implicated in there, or if there's stuff that he did, he needs to be held accountable. And I think the one I would worry most would be Bill Clinton. Because there's that famous picture of him in a blue dress, and he's posing, laying across the chair. I think there's going to be some heads rolling on this one.
It could be. Well, we're going to play a series of videos that are to me, just off the chart here. And the first one is old Chucky Schumer. And I'm going to set this up because he was being interviewed right before the Senate. The House had already passed the release files, and the Senate was about to take it up. And he was being asked about the Biden presidency, but he responded, I think, like they were talking about the Trump presidency. You can't make this up. Listen to this, Ted, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Out there, why wouldn't they have been released the last 4 years when President Biden was in office?
Well, that's the question every American is asking. Not every American, but so many Americans are asking. What the hell is he hiding? Why doesn't he want them released?
You know what, I agree with Chuck Schumer there. That is the question that plenty of Americans are asking. But Hillary, I want to get your thoughts on it.
But there you have it. He's sitting there. I think he's got this canned answer ready to be asked about Trump. But they asked him about Biden. Why didn't Biden release the files when the Democrats had all the control? And he said, that's exactly what I'm talking about. What are they hiding? I mean, wow. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, no, I thought that very same thing when they asked him that. He was thinking Trump, and it really was about Biden. Again, these people, they have so much vitriol for the president, and we're going to see that in some of these other clips, that it's all about the president. And here it was talking about Joe Biden, and he had 4 years to release that. I can't help but think when I look at Schumer, I'm thinking he reminds me of somebody. It was a cartoon character, and I think it's in that series called the Despicables. That guy with the pointed nose, and he's just the bad guy. So keep going, Chucky. This be your last Senate.
I mean, Chucky's got some issues. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
but it gets even crazier, Ted, because this next video I'm going to play you. It happened, I believe, in 2018. Now, let me set this up for you.
All right.
This lady's name is Stacey Plaskin.
I know her well.
She is currently, because you would have served with her back then, I guess.
I sure did.
She is currently the representative of the Virgin Islands, which is a non-voting member, similar to like the D.C. representative and stuff like that. But she was on this oversight committee, that was questioning Michael Cohen, I think is his name, the former attorney of President Trump. And while she's literally doing it, she's getting texted from Jeffrey Epstein, who was still alive at the time, about what to ask questions. Let's check this out, and we'll come back and talk about it.
That Jeffrey Epstein influenced a lawmaker's questions during a 2019 hearing with Michael Cohen, who was testifying against his former boss, Donald Trump. The texts between Epstein and Democratic delegate Stacey Plaskett, who represents the U.S. Virgin Islands, were sent in Pacific time. At 7:41 that morning, Epstein texted Plaskett, "Are you chewing?" 1 minute later, she responded, "Not anymore." Minutes before Plaskett was set to question Cohen, Epstein texted. Cohen brought up Rona, keeper of the secrets, misspelling her first name. Plaskett responded, "Rona?" and then asked, "Quick, I'm up next. Is that an acronym?" Epstein replied, "That's his assistant." Minutes later, Plaskett asked Cohen about Trump's assistant.
Is Miss Rona, what is Miss Rona's position?
Rona Graff is Mr. Trump's executive assistant.
And would she be able to corroborate many of the statements that you've made here?
Yes, her office is directly next to his, and she's involved in a lot that went on.
Epstein texted again after Plaskett finished her questions. Good work. After the Post published this report, Plaskett's office issued a statement that read in part, "During the hearing, Congresswoman Plaskett received texts from staff, constituents, and the public at large, offering advice, support, and in some cases, partisan vitriol, including..."
And there you have it. She's literally, Ted, being coached live by Jeffrey Epstein. And I want to make one more point, and I'll turn it over to you. At the time that she's doing this, Jeffrey Epstein had already been convicted of multiple felonies, pedophilia, prostitution of minors, and all of that stuff. Had already been convicted of that. He just hadn't been killed by probably Hillary Clinton, who said he was well hung, by the way. But anyway, and this is a Washington Post report. This is not the most liberal rag. I mean, right. Conservative rag, if you want to call it that. It's the Washington Post that broke this story. What are your thoughts on that, especially having served with her and knowing her personally, Ted?
I think it's an illustration of the swamp. Everybody is so... we want to do what's right. We're going to stand for justice. We're going to do this. But in the meantime, they have their hand out behind them, taking checks from all kinds of individuals. And they play the game of hypocrisy without really playing their hand. But they're so hypocritical up there, saying how bad these people are, but at the same time taking advice from them, taking money from them, until they get exposed, and then they come to Jesus, as we're going to see that here on one of the other videos. But I think that illustrates really, John, the culture in Washington, D.C. We got stuff sent to us by people that I just didn't believe in their beliefs, whether it was some of the unions or some of the other things, and we sent their checks back, just said, really appreciate your thoughts and your support, but we're not going to keep your check. You got to have standards, and there are a few people up there like that. Anyways, she may be one of the members that there'll be an open seat for a non-voting member, but they get all the other perks of Congress.
Well, the thing that really gets me, Ted, because people make mistakes. I'm not classifying that as one. I think that was intentional. But her explanation of why she did it just digs the hole even deeper. And we're seeing that a lot with the Democrats. A lot of times the politicians just can't look in there and say, I was wrong. They're like the Fonz. I was right. But her explanation, which just came out on CNN this past week, explaining why she did what she did, I think makes it even worse. But let's check it out and we'll come back.
Well, and she made a whole different persona. She's changed her look. Just like, I want to escape from what I used to be, and now look at me.
Yeah, that wasn't me. I don't know him. I don't know myself. But let's play this. And like I say, the explanation is even worse. Check it out.
Sure.
So Jeffrey Epstein was a constituent. He was a resident of the Virgin Islands, lived there, I guess, more than half of the year because he was registered there. I had received donations from him after the last investigation came out, which was after this texting. I gave any donations that I previously received from him to women's organizations and did not have any contact with him.
She's literally saying, Ted, that, I just was talking to a constituent of mine, talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and I didn't know anything about all of this stuff. As I say, the man had been convicted like a decade earlier and was in the news all the time, and was a convicted pedophile. She says she didn't know it. And I mean, it's just unbelievable that she would fall back on that. And even beyond that, Ted, and we're not going to play it, but I could play you a dozen videos of current members of Congress defending her actions there, which to me are just inexcusable. And the CNN interview, if you play the long form, at least the CNN interviewer did ask her, do you not think this was potentially wrong and could be read this way and all that? I mean, my God. I'll turn it back to you, Ted, but it's just, you can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't. And I think, again, it just illustrates how slimy that is up there, because she took the money, didn't return it until she knew it was getting exposed. And then what does she say? Well, I took the money and donated it to a children's society or a children's home. And it's like, Okay, yeah, that's absolution right there, right? So everything's fine because she did that. No, again, I think it just shows you the type of people that are serving up there, and that's the swamp. And you wonder why Trump can't get more done. There's people like that, and for the Democrats that vote or the Republicans that voted against her on that, I don't understand that. They should not have done that. I think they should have gone ahead and removed her.
Well, Ted, I don't know if you saw this, but Eric Swalwell has decided that he wants to run his own country, not just, be a member of Congress or maybe run for president or Senate. He wants to run his own country. So I want to play this announcement that he made over the weekend, and let's get your thoughts on it. Let's play it. Let's play it, and we'll come right back.
Of dirt for U.S. military aid.
Chris, so far, the evidence is uncontradicted that the president used taxpayer dollars to ask the Ukrainians to help him cheat an election. And the complaint that I've heard from Republicans all last week was that you don't have anyone who heard the call.
I'm sorry, Ted. I made a mistake. I'm sorry to our producer. That's actually the wrong video with the wrong announcement coming from the wrong end, I suppose. Let's play the actual. Let's get the right one. It's my fault, but let's play the real announcement.
You have
right
no
now.
shame.
I like to be a
Off
Harry.
the air, you and your colleagues supported
us,
and I appreciate that enormously. There you are with all wearing the hats. That felt good to see. I will tell you, I appreciate that. But the way you're talking, I think there's, we all have this hope that this is going to end and that things are going to get better, and yet it just is hard to imagine that happening. What do we do? What are we going to do? How do you stop this?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I love California. It's the greatest country in the world. Greatest country in the world. But that's why it pisses me off to see Californians running through the fields where they work from ICE agents or troops in our streets.
It's horrifying.
It's horrifying.
It's absolutely
Or cancer research
horrifying.
Being canceled. It's awful to look at. And our state, this great state, needs a fighter and a protector, someone who will bring prices down, lift wages up. And we can say that we're the fourth largest economy in the world, and we are, and I love to brag about that. But what does that mean if you can't afford to live here? So I've been in these fights as a city council member up in Dublin, my hometown, as a prosecutor in Oakland, and taking on the most corrupt president ever in the US Congress. But I'm ready to bring this fight home. So I came here tonight, Jimmy, to tell you and your audience that I'm running to be the next governor of California. I'm excited to do it.
Man got a standing ovation that he's going to run for governor of California, and he calls it a country. Maybe it is. Maybe we should just wall it off. If he gets elected, we should probably just wall the thing off and let it just be Escape from L.A. or whatever.
Well, number one, Eric Swalwell is like a herpes virus that it never goes away. It's going to be around and, passing gas on national television. When he opens his mouth, he's passing gas. I've got not a very high regard for him. He came in with me in Congress, and he's just always been one of those right on the fringe of the left, just the real loud left. I remember when we had the hearings, not that I was on intelligence, but I was able to go to those hearings when the Russian hoax was going on. Eric Swalwell was in there just running his mouth, interrupting. And it was interesting because Mark Meadows was in there, and Mark finally just told him to shut up. And Eric, I thought, was going to start crying. And his whole talk about California's the greatest country in the world. They were talking about seceding from the United States. They've got, I think, over 51% of their students in school are Hispanic and they don't speak English. And they want to secede. And I'm thinking, we don't want to do that, but how about we vote to let him out of the country and just cut him off there? He's just, it shows you where he is at. He wants to run California as a country. The other thing is, you heard his tirade when Trump was doing the extension to the White House, putting the ballroom on there. Eric Swalwell wants to tear it down. The next president needs to tear it down. I mean, that's how ignorant this guy is. If you really want to get at Trump, you don't tear it down. You name it the Nancy Pelosi ballroom or the Joe Biden ballroom. I don't want to give him any ideas, but he has so much hatred and vitriol against Trump. That's why he's running, because he wants to fight back against Trump. Trump's only going to be there another 2 years, 2.5 years. Again, this guy, if California elects him, it's kind of like New York City. You get what you want. And, of course, they don't have a big choice. It's him or Katie Porter.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, maybe he'll be good if California is its own country with foreign affairs and all, because we know that, and I'm wondering if President Xi will endorse him of China, because we know that he has a taste for Chinese. There he is, lady,
Chinese takeout,
Fang Banger or whatever, something like that. I mean, this woman is a now known spy for China, and he was having an affair with her. I mean,
was he married at the time?
Yes.
I know he's married now, but I don't know if he was
I believe he was.
I mean, the guy's a dirtbag, and it's just he's a political hack, is what he is. In California, please don't like this guy. I know him, and you don't want him there. You just don't want him. Look at what he's done in Congress. Look at his accomplishments in Congress. And if it's not very stellar, and I don't think it is, it's not going to be any better as governor of California.
We got Christmas coming up and people trying to figure out how to put toys. I always tell people to start with the instructions. And
that's why they need Carolyn there, my wife, because she won't let me put anything together without the instructions.
The instructions. And basically our government, the instructions is the U.S. Constitution. If we follow the U.S.
simple.
Constitution, our lives would be a whole lot.
Let's go back a couple thousand years before that, and there was the things called the Ten Commandments. If we would have just stuck to those.
And maybe the golden rule, that kind of thing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving, because we won't be back on the air until after Thanksgiving, of course. So a happy Thanksgiving. But I do, Ted, have some breaking news we want to break on our show
always like breaking
right
news.
now. Donald Trump has pardoned a couple turkeys, but the breaking news is a federal judge has overturned the pardon. This is false, but
that doesn't shock me at all. I can't imagine that. It's probably an Obama or Biden that appointed a federal judge.
Yeah,
but we are going into Thanksgiving, and there is so much to be thankful for in our country. We get to wake up in the freest country in the world. We get to choose what we want to do. We get to choose our leaders, and they're not dictated to us of who we're going to vote for unless it's the party of big government. We have to exercise our rights and freedoms and go home, enjoy it, hug your family, enjoy your time around, and we'll see you on when we come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Peace out, everybody.
Everybody take care. God bless.